Saints Row 2 in 2008 solidified itself as one of the best open world games of the 7th generation. Despite being in direct competition with Grand Theft Auto 4, it was able to hold its own, fully refining the flaws of its predecessor, increase its scope, take things less seriously, all while adding a sprinkle of dark flavor, telling gamers that another great open world franchise is on the rise. Thanks to nearly 5 million copies sold on multiple systems, Volition immediately began development on Saints Row 3. But old habits resurfaced as they didn't know what to do next, and if they did, they weren't sure if they wanted to explore further. For example, their first big idea was the main protagonist becoming an undercover cop, whose job is to expose the Saints in another city, presumably under the orders of Troy. But after concluding that it wasn't like Saints Row at all, they scrapped 6 months of work and started again. Although that does sound like a cool idea for an open world game, and it would be used later down the line. They couldn't get the tone right, and the Saints took over Stillwater more than once. What else was left to do? So they went back to basics and compiled a custom trailer made of movies, TV shows, and music that would assist in crystallizing their basic vision. But after one of the designers created the giant purple dildo as a melee weapon, now living in video game infamy, Eureka! Take the silly side of Saints Row 2 to levels that haven't been seen before. In almost every interview the developers did, they always mentioned that it was going to be more over the top and move as far away from the Grand Theft Auto series as possible. They wanted to be their own game. Staying true to their word even outside the game, they came up with rather unconventional ways to promote it.
Japanese commercials. Easiest money you'll ever make.
Grand larceny's right up there.
Along with the usual presentation at E3, special edition, recognizable names in acting roles and guest appearance in a trailer, etc., it also included promotional free car washes and petrol in Los Angeles and Sydney respectively. Sticking with the principle any publicity is good publicity, it helped further increase the hype for the game, becoming one of the most talked about of 2011, which is exactly what THQ needed while they were struggling financially.
I got 20k on this game. Damn! Now it's a draw.
Saints Row the 3rd was released for the PC, Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 on November 2011, and has very recently been ported to the Nintendo Switch. After first impressions, I was expecting this one to be my favourite. While I think graphics and storytelling are important, I'm the kind of guy that rates gameplay ahead of anything else. The whole point of a video game is immersive interactivity, and this was something the developers of Saints Row the 3rd thought a lot about. They wanted to make sure that from start to finish it would keep you on your toes. Oh, and this is a direct sequel where something big happens near the beginning, so spoiler alert. After all the rival gangs dissolved in Saints Row 2, the 3rd Street Saints merged with the Altor Corporation to become a giant superpower in business, selling all kinds of pointless junk you'd expect to make profit, like energy drinks, bobbleheads, a clothing branch, and movie production.
Alright, people. Nobody moves! Nobody dies!
Sorry, jumped his line. Can we go again?
The Saints rob a bank store to promote their upcoming film Saints Row the Movie, but are caught by the police and taken to Philippe Lauren, leader of the Syndicate, and offers to take 2/3 of the Saints' revenue in exchange for their lives, after it transpires that the bank belonged to him. Basically sacrifice almost everything they built and expect to cooperate because they're tied up in a flying plane. Of course, being the same boss who previously changed the fortunes of the Saints in Stillwater with a psychotic mindset, he or she isn't backing down for a second, and escape the plane in the most ridiculous way imaginable. What a way to start a video game. Unfortunately, Johnny, who stayed behind to give the boss and Shawnee a chance, is killed, and the Syndicate were able to hack into the Saints' accounts, effectively taking over 3/3 of their assets, including the ones in Stillwater.
Steelport belongs to the Syndicate, and the Saints are not welcome.
The Syndicate are made up of 3 gangs who control Steelport. They are the backbone of the city, legal and illegal. And after the Saints interrupted the status quo, they attempt to put them in their place. Fast. So with the Saints left with nothing, Boss, Shawnee and Pierce rearm themselves with bigger weapons, hire new lieutenants, and decide to make Steelport their new base of operation, taking the fight to the Syndicate, who are also flexing their muscles.
The Saints are no more than a white noise of empty threats.
With respect, sir, I'd say empty is no longer applicable.
With this level of gang activity rampant, I mean what you see sums up the level of carnage in this game in general, US Senator Monica Hughes hires the Stag to restore order. By being Saints Row, they end up doing the opposite, turning the whole city into a war zone that's up for grabs.
It's our time now. Let's get this shit started.
Okay, firstly, killing off Johnny Gat. Are you serious? This is from the perspective that I just played the first two Saints Row titles, but Johnny is the most likable character of the whole series. Why would you get rid of him? Especially if Pierce is nothing in comparison. I think the most likely explanation, based on the way the developers talk about the plot, is that the Saints are the giant corporate sellouts who think they're bulletproof. With regenerating health, I guess they are to a certain degree.
Seriously, movie deals, commercials. Saint's name used to mean something more than body spray and some ass-tasting energy drink.
But then receive a rude awakening when they try to take over another city, which costs one of their big members their life, therefore infuriating the player enough to want to get payback on the syndicates.
There is no mercy, only death. Don't mourn your friend. You'll be joining him soon.
At least it opens the window for the new characters to be themselves, including Kinsey, Angel, Zemos, Viola, and Oleg. All very different, including the returning ones thanks to the celebrity status, especially Shaundy.
Put in your tampons and let's do this.
However, Killbane is surprisingly one of the funniest whenever you foil any of his plans.
Call me eccentric, but I'm just an entertainer slash businessman slash philanthropist slash...
We get it.
This must be why there are plenty of wrestling-inspired taunts in the character customization. One of the big members of the Syndicate or gang leader is a wrestler himself.
We don't do a run-in, we hit him with a Montreal screw drop!
In all honesty, that mission where you're in the ring, that's one of the best ones. That, and when you pretend to be the stag leader, that one's up there as well.
Welcome back, sir.
What's up?
Thing is, the game as a whole, it's not as funny as I was hoping.
Well, this is a nice surprise.
Don't get me wrong, almost all the characters here are likable, but without Johnny Gat it's not the same. And it's hard to accept the boss as a more explicit Nathan Drake considering how much of a maniac he or she was in Saints Row 2.
People need to wake up and see the threat that scum like you are to innocent people.
It goes to show you just how important character development is, no matter how focused the plot is. Like the predecessor, it's the gameplay itself that has the biggest sense of humor. It represents what gamers are more likely to do in an open world game. They must have had an hour-long meeting where they got the whole team to brainstorm ideas once their vision was realized. Then the designer piled everything up and said, we're gonna do every single one of these ideas. That's what Saints Row the Third feels like to play. If it doesn't make sense, then it makes sense here. Or as Greg Donovan would say, embrace the crazy, fun trumps all, king of the carnival, and suspension of disbelief. It's fantastic.
No rules? I can work with that.
Whenever I review an open world game, match the footage with the dialogue and the editing, sometimes I would run out of gameplay and find other things to do to fill in the gaps. But with the Saints Row games, there's always so much going on, I've got too many exciting moments to fit in, because that's how action focused they are, and why we love video games. It no longer uses a multi-branch structure where all three rival gangs and lieutenants have their own story to tell. It's more similar to the GTA series where missions are triggered whenever you complete another, no matter what gang you're going after, since all three gangs in Steelport are working together, and what affects one gang affects the whole organization.
I'm the walking apocalypse, and I make the decisions, not you!
My bad, mate.
However, okay, it's just a minor nitpick, but because it's explosive, stylish, and cartoonish all the time, the pacing feels just as inconsistent as the predecessor for different reasons. Or in this case, too consistent. You get to the final mission, it's just the same level of intensity, but it goes for a few minutes longer. It doesn't feel like it's coming to an end, it just happens.
We got a tank!
Oh no, don't you dare! I don't want that thing anywhere near my computer.
Don't worry, love. Tank is off limits. Of course not. Have you gone mental?
And in later years, thanks in small part to Saints Row 4, fan reception of the presentation has been more polarized, because many felt it took away its real identity for the sake of being loud, as if it was adding the science fiction genre into the mix, which is why so many think Saints Row 2 is the best in the series, that it did the crazy sense of humor better because it was able to balance it out with the series properly, despite developers believing otherwise, which almost made it about as good as open world games got, while still trying to distance itself from the Grand Theft Auto series. The way I see it, if personnel changes throughout the series, ideas of what direction it should be heading will be different to when the first Saints Row was made. Besides, what's better, Undercover Cop or what we've got? This is why I like to review a series of games from the beginning, or otherwise I would think people are crazy, because I love what they did in Saints Row the Third and it puts a smile on my face every time I play it. But at the same time, it no longer feels like the gang simulator from the predecessors.
This ain't some elaborate setup for a gang bang.
Why you gotta put that image in my head, bro?
At least nobody can dispute the graphics, which add to the madness you see on screen. When looking at the Xbox 360 version, while the frame rate is still questionable, it has glossier colors, shinier reflections, better lighting, no screen tearing, just an all-round improvement. And it only crashed once. Deliberately, in the same way Batman Arkham Asylum did, although it wasn't as convincing. Also, unlike Saints Row 2, the PC port is nowhere near as unstable compared to its console counterparts. The Nintendo Switch port? I haven't tried it yet since I've played that system only once as of this review. That might surprise a lot of you. Although I've heard the news isn't good, so play that version at your own risk. But from what I've experienced, this was considered a step forward.
You should be more careful. I saw you coming 2 blocks ago. Traffic cameras. They're everywhere in this town.
Good to know.
I'm serious.
It's just a shame that the map is only city skyscrapers and housing in which a majority can't be accessed. They have improved a few little things like arrows pointing where to go while driving if you use the GPS. The public perception as you advance through the game changes, including protests, yeah we deserve it, and zombie outbreaks. It's not a popularity contest anymore, and the layout is better designed for missions and action set pieces. But imagine how these would have looked if it set itself out of town a bit. I know bringing back Stillwater for a third consecutive time couldn't be a more repetitive idea, but Steelport isn't ambitious enough in that regard. A 6th generation title can fit a map this size. 3 years isn't enough to make an all new map along with everything else that comes with it, given how complicated gaming technology has become over the last decade. And that's why it doesn't feel as immersive as a GTA title. I suppose it gives you a feeling of being bigger than the city. That's the nicest thing I could say about the map.
Never see this place again? It'll be too soon. Ugh, don't suppose you have any hand sanitizer?
Since the Syndicate operate more like a legitimate corporation, and because they took away all the Saints' assets, instead of entering missions and strongholds to take over a portion of the city, all the things you do in the predecessor that aren't missions and strongholds are now part of territory takeover. Everything is operated through your phone, including map, earnings, and where current missions are located, including the DLC ones.
You should toss out your fancy overpriced phone. I can find you through that too.
The map obviously represents a piece of territory, and each takeover increases the percentage. These can include buying businesses which also earn you money, activities, collectors, fan photos, and gang operations which feel like a lighter version of Stronghold. You can still call homies to help you out, including the major characters, who are unlocked sooner compared to Saints Row 2. They can even deliver a vehicle no matter how unreasonable the request is.
I'm saying we use a tank.
This may be the best idea you've ever had.
Oh, God, what the hell are you doing?
Going after the truck?
I said don't use the tank!
Come on, Kinsey. Tanks are fun for rampaging, but unfortunately they don't roam around the city that much even if you've taken over the territory, and major characters disappear when entering either a mission or activity. I guess they didn't want to make the same mistakes again, like that one time in Saints Row 2 when Shawnee called me about the next Brotherhood mission despite already following me. Speaking of the activities, I remember criticizing the first Saints Row for having too many that weren't even that good. Here, it's almost the opposite. They keep getting better and better as each title passes.
Ah, nice move.
The Hitman and Chop Shop activities are gone, and insurance fraud has made the boss weigh 10 times less, although that might have made it too easy. The only real criticism I have with them is the lack of new activities apart from 1 or 2, like Professor Genki's super ethical reality climax, which looks like a colored version of Mad World with guns. Not a bad activity actually.
This game looks deadly, because it is, but it's still probably safer than driving in Steelport.
But they try to make up for it with a couple of variations which make things more interesting, like this Tron-inspired Trailblazer, or taking Eye of the Tiger way too literally.
Well, aren't you a nice kitty?
So yeah, the way you rebuild your empire is different enough that it took a bit of time to comprehend how it all works. However, in the predecessors, it was set up so that if you want to enter missions or strongholds, there were friends in town that needed help, so you have to give it to them whether you like it or not. In Saints Row III, because the story is more about hurting the Syndicate, everything I just mentioned is completely optional. You do not need to take over 100% of Steelport to complete all the missions. That to me suggests that the developers had a lot of confidence in the gameplay structure. Okay, you will need to do all the activities with the Saints Lieutenants at least once to advance through the game, presumably to gain enough trust to help you, and it unlocks another set of those said activities across the map. But aside from that, everything's optional, and because they're fun to do, you'll be less inclined to avoid it anyway.
You'd think they were guarding something vital.
I'm not surprised. Publicity is the key to taking a city.
Guns also work.
You still have a respect meter which increases in levels the more you perform this stuff. However, it's there to unlock perk and upgrade options which improve the boss's abilities. And the money earned from the businesses and missions are used for said upgrades, weaponry, and customization.
You're worried about real estate? We have guns. Let's use them. The crew's ready downstairs. Say the word and we crash the party.
Let's do it.
It seems like you get a new crib every mission. Now I was expecting a higher number of everything regarding customization of your character. After what I got in Saints Row 2, a follow-up surely wouldn't let me down. Okay, you have a lot of unique outfits to choose from. Good, but what you can do with them has been sanitized. No layers, no patterns, only individual colors, which is disappointing for a game intended to take customization to another level. I mean, why did they take away something as simple as socks? Like, did it not occur to them that it's something pretty much required when wearing shoes? And they were in the predecessors, by the way. Because I'm using the full package for this review, I promised myself I would go all out with the clothing options from the start. But I found it surprisingly difficult to look what is considered badass. It must be my heavy metal taste conflicting with the complete bonkers, which I think is what the developers intended you to do. I feel the same way when customizing facial features. You can choose between build, race, gender, alien species, and personality. I picked this taunt because I love the game Bully. But not only are there less haircut options, but there are, again, no subcategories like mustaches, sideburns, goatees, beards, and you don't get to choose a secondary color either. What happened?
Oh my god, can I just shoot this guy?
Sean D, play nice now.
Look, I don't want to sound like the whole thing is a dud. It provides the opportunity to make more outfits that make you laugh. There's more to it than just being a gangster, like wearing a formal suit while skiing down a snowy mountain. And I have to admit, after looking at the footage I recorded when I beat it, I was so disappointed with myself I decided to replay parts of the game all over again, which I was fine with because the gameplay is epic. And now it all starts to make sense. That's what I should have looked like from the beginning. Whatever you think, you still get way more customization options than GTA 4, which was the latest in the series at the time. Do you know what? I take it back. I'm happy with what I created on both playthroughs, but I like what you can do with the outfits thanks to layers and individual parts in Saints Row 2 better because you could be yourself more, while still being easy to comprehend. In fact, the only aspect regarding customization that's better is the vehicle, which provides a little bit more options with a few more cars and bikes to tune. Although thanks to the full package, I already had an automotive playground from the start. I wouldn't bother with modifying the performance, however, because while the cars move slightly faster than the predecessors and the boss only needs a second to jump in, they're still too slow compared to other open world games around that time, most likely to compensate for the smaller map. You'd think there would be at least a few cars at a midnight club fast, but what they lack in pace, they make up for it in sheer lunacy. There are a lot of pre-made creative vehicles to drive, including a tank inspired by Battlezone, the Gatmobile, anything related to the Syndicate or Genki, and flying vehicles return with a vengeance, playing a heavier role in the missions. But the one that takes the cake is the jet helicopter hybrid, the VTOL I think it's called. I want one of those.
Focus fire on that VTOL until another target is located.
Like this.
This must be the biggest reason why the Stag are in this game. You get all their advanced technology at some point. At first, the controls feel like they've been changed around too much, and not just because I played the first 2 games on different consoles. I found myself jumping instead of reloading because the buttons were switched around, and there was one time when I accidentally jumped out of a helicopter while trying to figure out how to ascend and descend, so that was a silly moment right there. Then I realized I'm playing Saints Row the Third. This is considered par for the course. As long as you can drive-by shoot with one of the trigger buttons, I'm completely content with how they changed it. You don't drive by as often in this game anyway, so the controls have finally reached a point where I have almost nothing to criticize.
They should never have fought the Saints.
I think the big difference is when you're aiming, it becomes a third-person shooter without a cover system. You strafe when you zoom in, and enemies are smarter. And less said about the penetrator, the better, although GTA San Andreas technically did it first. Because it's so action-packed, the lightest, quietest mission, for example, has you taking on a giant brute for the first time. I mean, come on, you can't have a mission where you're learning how to customize things and not expect anything else. And you get a bigger arsenal and garage of weapons, equipment, and vehicles than the predecessors completed before you even reach the halfway point. Do I need to repeat myself twice? And if you want to make the boss even more indestructible than he or she already is, I haven't fully spoken about the perks and upgrades yet. As you earn enough respect, you can purchase extra ammo, increased health, more stamina, gain abilities, all that jazz. Or hip hop in this case. They really do make a difference, or to rephrase, make the game easier than it already is. Stand in the gunfire for longer. There's even one perk where you can take no damage from bullets. Now I know you'd probably have to beat the whole game to reach a high enough respect level to unlock it, but that's pathetic. Although enemies take a lot of firepower, you can take even more than that no matter how much the boss is upgraded, and the melee attacks almost kill them instantly, so it doesn't matter. Even on the first playthrough, I barely panicked even when I was low on health. It feels intense, but not in the same way that it makes you want to check every corner. I guess that's why the Saints had no hesitation or fear in robbing the army straight after being completely strapped for cash at the beginning. They knew it'd be easy. And going back to the mission structure, you have a few multiple choice moments, but they only affect how much you earn, not the actual storyline. And you don't even need most of this stuff to cruise through the game regardless of difficulty. The only moments where I struggled were the final mission and what I think is defend your territory against 10 waves of enemies and then some. I don't understand this one too much. At least it auto-saves each wave, so all that respect you earn from killing rival gangs will be sealed, even after getting smoked. But aside from that, it's clear that the developers didn't want to risk compromising any of the fun by making it too hard. So if it's a challenge you're looking for, try and beat it on the hardest difficulty, without buying any perks or upgrades unless you unlock them through missions and activities. At least it isn't difficult for all the wrong reasons, and when you're dominating, it's still amusing. It's like an interactive Michael Bay movie, but it somehow doesn't feel redundant after a long time. Maybe because you're in the thick of it. I couldn't stop playing it. I like this game.
We can't hold them back!
The only thing that bothers me about Saints Row the Third is that it only took 3 years to make. If only Volition had another generation to do what they want without time constraints, while adding all the upsides of Saints Row 2, additional customization options, missions, a bigger map, and Johnny Gat, then I would rate it over the Grand Theft Auto titles. I'm not kidding about that. I suppose they were put in a peculiar position because their publisher THQ were in serious financial trouble and needed a big success to keep the company alive. And for a brief moment, that's exactly what Saints Row the Third did, outselling its predecessor. But thanks to the You Draw game tablet, it was the final straw, and THQ filed for bankruptcy in 2012, dissolving the next year. However, Volition was bought by Deep Silver, and plans for another follow-up continued, so expect a review of Saints Row 4 in the future.
You can't be serious.
Works for me.
Say what you want about Saints Row the Third distancing itself from the predecessors, the reward comes in the action and gameplay, which if you've seen my reviews is what I value most. Any game is an instant recommendation if it feels quicker to beat than it actually does. Although it only took 15 hours to beat including DLC, so it could have been longer. However, I still rate Saints Row 2 as the better game. There's just something about that one. I think it did more for the series, it has a more focused identity, and it felt more satisfying to beat. I'm not saying it's better, it's just what I like playing more. The third one feels more like a 180 in tone, but if that's all you care about, then this game is for you. There's no harm in liking both. It's loud, it's fun, it's juvenile, it's exciting, it controls well, you have plenty to do, and it's purple.
Steelport is safe once again. But who knows when the Saints and their new allies may be called on to protect her. The end? Question mark?